The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, died on a Monday morning, 632 CE, in the arms of his wife Aisha, in the city of Medina. The companions outside did not believe it. Umar ibn al-Khattab, the second most powerful man in early Islam, stood up and told the people that the Prophet had not died, that he had gone to meet his Lord as Moses had gone, and would return. Then Abu Bakr arrived. He went in. He uncovered the face of the Prophet. He kissed his forehead, and he came back out. He said, "Whoever worshipped Muhammad, Muhammad is dead. Whoever worships Allah, Allah is eternal. He does not die." Umar sat down. The words had cut through everything. What happened next would determine whether the faith those men had given their lives to build would survive another year. It almost did not. Arabia began to unravel before the Prophet's body was buried. This requires understanding. The tribes of Arabia had accepted Islam under varying degrees of conviction. Some had entered the faith deeply, understood it, lived it, built their lives around it. Others had submitted politically. They paid the zakat, the religious tax. They said the words, but their loyalty was to the tribe first, and to whatever power the tribe aligned with. The Prophet had been that power. Now the Prophet was gone. Tribes across Arabia began to apostatize. Some declared outright that they had left Islam. Others said they would continue to pray, but they would no longer pay the zakat. That was a distinction without a difference. It was a declaration of separation. False prophets rose from every direction. Tulayha ibn Khuwaylid of the Banu Asad declared himself a prophet. He gathered thousands. Sajjah bint al-Harith, a woman from the north, declared prophethood. She gathered an army. And from Yamama, the fertile region of central Arabia, came the most dangerous of them all, Musaylimah ibn Habib, a man the companions called Musaylimah the Liar. He had actually met the Prophet once. He had been part of a delegation that came to Medina. He had seen Islam from the inside. And then he had gone home and declared himself its equal. He had 40,000 followers. He controlled a region with food, water, and defensible terrain. He had already repelled one Muslim army sent against him. Within weeks of the Prophet's death, the Muslim state in Medina was surrounded on every side by forces that wanted it gone. The companions were divided on what to do. Some argued for patience, for negotiation. The Muslim army was small, the threats were many. Perhaps the zakat dispute could be resolved through dialogue. Perhaps fighting on every front at once was too great a risk. Abu Bakr listened, and then he said no. His words were exact. He said, "By Allah, if they refuse to give me even a rope that they used to give to the messenger of Allah, I will fight them for it." This was not bravado. This was theology. Abu Bakr understood something the negotiators had not fully grasped. The zakat was not a tax. It was an act of worship. To refuse it was not a political disagreement. It was a statement about what Islam was. And if that statement went unchallenged, Islam would not survive as a living faith. It would become a memory of something that had existed briefly while one man was alive. He made his decision. They would fight on every front simultaneously. And he sent Khalid ibn al-Walid to begin. What Khalid did over the next months is unlike anything else in this period. He did not rest between battles. He did not consolidate and wait. He moved. Speed was the strategy. Because the tribes of Arabia were watching each other. If one tribe saw another apostatize and face no consequences,
He defeated Tulayha at the Battle of Buzaka. Tulayha, who had gathered thousands, who had declared himself a prophet, who had drawn tribes to his banner, fled the battlefield on a camel when he saw what was coming. He survived. He eventually converted back to Islam. He later fought with distinction in later campaigns. But that day, he ran from Khalid. Tribe after tribe fell back into line, some through battle, some through the sight of Khalid's army on the horizon. He moved south, toward Yamama, toward Musaylimah. Understand who Musaylimah was. He was not a simple fraud. He was intelligent, he was charismatic. He had studied the Quran and produced his own imitation, verses designed to sound prophetic to people who wanted to believe. His followers were not ignorant. Many of them were from the Banu Hanifa, a tribe with pride, history, and capability. They believed in him, not because they were fools, but because he gave them something every false prophet gives his followers: the feeling of being chosen. He also had a significant military advantage. Yamama was his home territory. He knew the terrain. His 40,000 fighters were defending their own land. They were motivated, they were organized. And one Muslim army had already failed against them. Ikrimah ibn Abi Jahl, sent ahead of Khalid, had engaged Musaylimah's forces and been forced back. Khalid arrived and combined the forces. He looked at what was in front of him. 40,000 men, defending terrain they knew, already having beaten one Muslim force. He began to plan. The Battle of Yamama, December 632 CE, is described in the historical sources with a consistency of horror that makes it clear every man who survived it never forgot what he saw. Khalid reorganized the army before the battle began. He made one specific change that would prove critical. He organized the soldiers by tribe, not by general unit, by tribe. Each man fighting beside men he had grown up with, men whose families he knew, men whose honor he shared. The reason was direct. If a man breaks and runs in a general formation, he is anonymous in his cowardice. If he breaks and runs from beside men who know his name, he cannot hide from it. Khalid understood that courage is partly social. It requires witnesses. The battle began. The fighting was unlike anything the early Muslim army had experienced. Musaylimah's followers did not fight like men defending a political position. They fought like men defending a faith, because to them, that is what it was. The Muslim line broke 3 times. It reached the point where Musaylimah's fighters pushed into the Muslim camp itself, the rear where the supplies were, where the non-combatants had sheltered. Khalid rallied them each time. He moved along the line the way he had always moved, without panic, without the kind of urgency that spreads fear. Calm under conditions that would have broken most men. He said, "Let the men of each tribe fight under their own banner. Let each man know who is watching him." The line held. Then it pushed back. Musaylimah's forces retreated to a walled garden on the edge of the battlefield. They sealed themselves inside. The garden had one entrance. 40,000 men pressed into a confined space with walls on every side. History would name that place Hadiqat al-Maut, the Garden of Death. The Muslim army surrounded the walls. The garden was fortified. The entrance was defended. Any direct assault through the gate would be men funneled into a killing ground, dying in a bottleneck while the defenders stood above them. A companion named Al-Bara ibn Malik stepped forward. Al-Bara was known for one thing above all others. He wanted to die as a martyr. He had wanted it his entire adult life. He had fought in battle after battle and survived every one, which he considered with a kind of bitter humor to be a failure on his part. He said, "Throw me over the wall." The men looked at him. He said it again, "Throw me over the wall. I will open the gate from inside." They threw him over the wall.
What happened inside that garden, Al-Bara survived to tell. He landed among thousands of men who wanted him dead. He fought, alone, moving toward the gate. He reached it. He opened it. The Muslim army poured in. The fighting inside the garden was the worst of the entire battle. Confined space, no room to maneuver. Every step forward was a contest. Musaylimah died inside that garden. He was killed by two men simultaneously. The historical sources name them both. The first was Abdullah ibn Zayd. The second was Washi ibn Harb. Washi ibn Harb. Remember that name. Washi had been enslaved before Islam. At the Battle of Uhud, fighting on the Quraysh side, he had been promised his freedom if he killed Hamza ibn Abd al-Muttalib, the Prophet's uncle, the Lion of Allah. He killed him. He was freed. Years later, Washi converted to Islam. He came to the Prophet. He was forgiven. He lived the rest of his life carrying the weight of what he had done, the greatest act of his life before Islam, the thing he could never undo. At Yamama, Washi killed Musaylimah. He said afterward, "I killed the best of men while I was a pagan, and I killed the worst of men while I was a Muslim. I hope that one cancels out the other." The battle was over. Musaylimah was dead. The Banu Hanifa surrendered. Arabia would not rise against Islam again in this form. The victory was total. The cost was devastating. More than 1,200 Muslim soldiers died at Yamama, many of them companions of the Prophet, men who had prayed behind him, who had heard the Quran directly from his recitation. Among the dead, more than 70 men who had memorized the entire Quran. 70 men who carried the words of Allah in their chests, gone in a single afternoon. Umar ibn al-Khattab understood what this meant before anyone else did. He went to Abu Bakr. He said, "The Quran reciters are being killed in battle. If we lose more of them, much of the Quran will be lost. I think you should order the collection of the Quran into a single written text." Abu Bakr hesitated. How could he do something the Prophet had not commanded? Umar said, "By Allah, it is good." Abu Bakr was eventually convinced. He appointed Zayd ibn Thabit, one of the Prophet's scribes, to compile every written fragment, every verified memorization, into a single, complete text. The Quran you hold today, the same text, the same words, unchanged across 14 centuries, exists in part because of what happened at the Garden of Death. The battle that nearly destroyed Islam produced the act that preserved it. Khalid ibn al-Walid is remembered for Yarmouk, for the brilliance of his tactics, for the undefeated record. But historians who study this period carefully argue that Yamama, the Riddah Wars, may have been his most important contribution. Because at Yarmouk, the stakes were territory. At Yamama, the stakes were whether Islam would exist at all. And it is worth sitting with that. A movement that had changed the course of human history, that had taken the message of one man in a desert and spread it across an entire civilization, came within a battle of disappearing in the first year after that man's death.
It survived because of specific people who made specific choices. Abu Bakr, who said no to negotiation when negotiation would have meant the end. Al-Bara ibn Malik, who said, "Throw me over the wall," and meant it. Washi ibn Harb, who spent the rest of his life trying to balance a ledger that only Allah can balance. And Khalid ibn al-Walid, who moved without rest, who organized broken men into formations, who kept his mind working when the battle was at its most desperate. These were not perfect men. They were men who showed up when showing up was the hardest thing. That is what this channel is about. This is the straight path.
Next episode, we go back to the beginning of Khalid's life as a Muslim, before Yarmouk, before the Riddah Wars, to the first time he was ever tested on the side of Islam. 3 commanders died in a single battle. The army was surrounded. Khalid had no rank, no title, no appointment. He picked up the flag anyway. The Battle of Mu'tah. If this reached you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Wassalamu alaikum.